Please be seated, and I invite the kids to come forward. And we're going to talk a bit. I told the kids that sometimes they might think I'm really just talking to them, but you guys know that you might get something out of it too. You guys are too old? All right, so it's possible that I already talked to these two girls about what we're going to talk about, and they might remember some things, right? So, first question is, next Sunday is Trinity Sunday, and we are Trinity Church, so it's another big day for us. What is the Trinity? Zoe? Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Exactly. There are three, it's kind of a mystery because it's really one God, but there are three different ways that we know God, right? We know God Creator, and we know God, the one who was born on I just gave the answer right, born on Christmas and lived on earth, and that was, right, Jesus. And then the third part of the Trinity, the third way we know God is what? Together? The Holy Spirit, right? We do that. So today is the day that we especially celebrate and notice and pay attention to the Holy Spirit. And that's because of what happened on this day. What is today that we celebrate? Do you know what it's called? Pentecost. And why are so many people wearing red? Yes? Yes, because fire is one of the symbols of the Holy Spirit. So that's the color for Pentecost, and I even put on the chasuble that's very, very red. So I fit in, because I wanted to fit in. So the thing is that the disciples were gathered. Jesus had already risen from the dead on Easter, and he stayed with them for 40 days, and then he ascended into heaven. But before he left, he said, I'm going to be going away. And they were all like, no, don't leave us. And he said, it's okay. It's going to be all right. I need to go because I can't stay here with you. But I promise I will send a comforter, right? So somebody that will comfort you. And also he said, I will send an advocate. Do you know what an advocate is? An advocate is someone who looks out for you. Even if you're in trouble and you're in court, your advocate is the lawyer that defends you. And if you're in the hospital and you're too sick to pay too much attention, it's so helpful to have an advocate there to talk to the doctors and find out the best way to take care of you. So an advocate is on your side and looks out for you. And also, the Holy Spirit is an inspiration. The Holy Spirit has ways of giving us insights, figuring things out, and of helping us. So I think it's a great reminder that the Holy Spirit is with us always, and the Holy Spirit can help us in so many ways. And I'm going to tell you a couple, but first, what are the other symbols of the Holy Spirit besides fire? Yes? A dove, right? Did anybody notice a dove in church before today? Yes. Did you see it up there flying around? Yeah. Because when Jesus was baptized and he came up out of the water, God spoke from heaven, and also God came in the form of the Holy Spirit in bodily form as a dove, and it rested on him. So we think of the dove as a symbol of the Holy Spirit. And there's one more that we talked about. The wind, yeah. Because the disciples were gathered in the upper room on Pentecost when Jesus said, I will send the Holy Spirit, and he said, you go to Jerusalem. So they went there, and there was a big Jewish festival called Pentecost, or Shavuos. And they were gathered, and they were inside a room, and all of a sudden, what happened? A rush of wind. It was like, whoa! The windows weren't open. It was just suddenly very windy. And then, what happened next? Do you remember? Yeah, they started speaking in different languages they didn't know. Something else happened in between there. Yeah, tongues of fire rested on their heads, but they didn't catch on fire. That would have been very dangerous. And then they could speak different languages. And they went out and they started speaking in these other languages, and people who knew those languages, who had gathered for this festival from all over, they could understand what they were saying. And, they could understand other languages too, I think, because Peter later spoke to everybody at once in Greek. But I think it makes a difference when they heard it in their mother tongue. It got right into their heart in a way that just hearing words couldn't. But when they heard it from the language they had known since they were born, since they were babies, it helped them to understand. And so many people became followers of Jesus that day because they heard about what happened and what he did. So that is also known as the birthday of the church. So I told you I was going to tell you about the Holy Spirit, and because the Holy Spirit is also wind and even air, sometimes when I feel like I need God, to feel God very close, I just breathe in. Because then I think about Holy Spirit being wind, and maybe that's the Holy Spirit coming in. And there are times that I'm interacting with somebody and they are not being kind. And in my mind, I pray a prayer that the Holy Spirit will come into them and help them see the truth and help them learn to be more loving. And then, sometimes even in the middle of that, I say, oh, wait a second. Who's the one that actually needs the Holy Spirit? Me. Yeah. That maybe it's as important for me to have the Holy Spirit and get some insight, like why are they behaving that way? Or get some insight to say, what part am I playing? And how can the Holy Spirit inspire me to do the right thing? On Pentecost, there was this miracle. And the main thing we remember is the languages, right? And did you hear people speaking different languages? What did you think of that? It was cool. It's a little bit freaky, isn't it? No? I think it's very cool. But the thing is that many people could hear, and they heard the story about Jesus, like I said, in a language that got right to their hearts. But other people, were you listening to the reading? What did other people say? Other people said, oh my goodness, they're drunk. Because they didn't understand, I think. They just heard this weirdness and said, they're just saying things they don't even know. And that's when Peter said, no, we're not drunk. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning. Like, who could possibly be? Oh, wait. Well, no. That's what he said anyway. And he said, we're not. But I think that tells me that when the people could hear the language, that there was a miracle that was happening not only with the disciples speaking, but it was also happening, not only the tongue, the speaking, but also the ear. The people that were able to hear, that was the part of the miracle that was also needed. And so when I'm thinking about how somebody else needs the Holy Spirit, it's suddenly I get this other miracle in my ears and saying, that's what I actually need, isn't it? I need to be able to hear. I need to be able to hear. I'm going to tell you one more thing, and it's a quick story. And it's my Pentecost, I think of it as my own Pentecost story. When I experienced a miracle of being able to speak another language, not exactly the way that the disciples did. I wasn't really speaking another language, but somehow I was able to speak a cultural language that I didn't know I was doing, and it helped me in a great way. Do you guys know that I have a daughter who was born in China? Do you know what's her name? Oceana. Yeah, do you remember Oceana? When she was a baby, she was very sick, and she was left in a hospital. And a doctor perform surgery on her, and he saved her life. But then they couldn't find her parents, so they took her to the orphanage. And that's when she became available. I ended up adopting her, right? My husband Richard and I adopted her. So when she was 13 or 12, she was 13, and we went back to China because I wanted her to experience the country of her birth and to meet Chinese people, and I wanted her to meet the nannies who had taken care of her in the orphanage. And I really wanted her to meet that doctor who had saved her life, because I thought that was going to be helpful for her story, because there was a lot she didn't know. She doesn't know who her birth parents are. That's unknown. So we went back to China, and we went to several places, and we did go to her orphanage, and we met the nanny that I remembered who had brought her to me, and they told her some things. They told her that she was, I don't know if you know this about her personality, she's very small, she's 4'9", but she's kind of like in charge in a way, you know. They told me that they used to call her the general. And anyway, I asked them about the doctor. You know, I said, do you think we could meet the doctor? And they said, oh no, he doesn't work at that hospital anymore. And I kind of knew enough about Chinese culture that I thought that probably wasn't true. And in my culture, I would want to say, you're lying to me, right? But in Chinese culture, it's different. It's like the polite thing to do. Like, it's understood that you would make up a story rather than say, well, yeah, but you can't meet him. They wouldn't be that direct. So they make up this story, and it's not the same as what we think of as lying exactly. So I kind of knew enough about that, so I just kind of nodded. And then, but I still hoped I could. There was another piece, and that is that whenever a child is left and their parents aren't found, they have to have what's called a certificate of abandonment when babies are left. And so I had her certificate of abandonment, and it told me the name of the person who found her in the lobby of that hospital. And I thought maybe I could meet that person, and that would be another connection, right? Or we could, Oceana and I. So anyway, so we go to the hospital, and we had a guide with us that spoke Chinese, so she was able to talk to some people, and she found some people in the surgery department, and they said, oh, yes, he still works, the doctor still works at this hospital, but he's been gone he's away for 2 weeks. You can't meet him. He's working in another hospital for 2 weeks. And I said, oh, okay. And we got a couple slightly different stories from people, so I wasn't sure what was true, right? And I asked about the woman who had found her, and they said, oh, she doesn't work here anymore. And I said, oh, what do you have any contact information? And they said, no, she didn't give us any contact information. So we were getting nowhere. But I had some hospital reports. You guys are sticking with me really well because this is a long story. It's longer than I meant to make it. And the hospital reports had doctors' handwriting of what happened, but guess what? Doctors have bad handwriting, even in China. If I showed it to you, it would look like chickens walked across the page. It was so hard to read. And I had shown it to some Chinese people, and they were like, I can't tell you what it says. Because also, they were medical words that most people don't know. So our guide asked somebody at the hospital if they would type up what it says. And this woman just agreed to do that. And she took the hospital reports, and she started typing, and then every once in a while she'd go out into the hallway and find a doctor and say, what do you think this says? And then she'd come back and so that was great. So I finally had a Chinese, that was legible, that we could read, and then I could get it translated. So we found out some things about it. But she also just had told me that we could not meet the doctor. So, somehow, I don't know why, but I had a picture of Oceana from when we first met her. And I had a picture of her recent from when she was 13 years old. And on the back, I wrote her name in Chinese. I knew the Chinese characters for her name. And I wrote Mama in Chinese. I had learned that. And then I wrote down my email address. And I just said, if you ever find them, would you show them the pictures? They might want to know that that baby survived, and look at her now. And I said, and I just want to thank them. I just want to say thank you. And I had brought some gifts, and so I took them out of my backpack, and the woman who did all the transcribing, I gave her a couple of gifts. And I said, I just want to say thank you so much. And guess what she said? She said, just a minute, I'll be right back. And she went back to her office. And then she came back and she said, well, he's gone for the day, but he'll be back at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So somehow I had been given the gift of speaking the right words, of doing the right thing that communicated to her how important this was. And she told us we could meet the doctor. And we did. We came back the next morning, and Oceana got to meet him. And I have pictures of them together. And we named our daughter Oceana, not knowing much about her. She's named after an ancestor of my late husband. And guess what the doctor's name was? His name was Nihaibo, and it means ocean wave. Isn't that awesome? So that's all about Pentecost, and a little bit about the Holy Spirit, and a lot about me. Right? Sorry. That's my Pentecost story. Thanks, you guys. I appreciate it. You can go back, and we're going to take this baptismal feast as an opportunity to renew our baptismal vows.